The morning came in gray and still, the kind of quiet that settled before something broke. Clara stood at the edge of her porch with a letter in her hands and did not move for a long time. She had read it 3 times already. Each time, the words said the same thing. 30 days. That was all she had left. 30 days before the land her husband had worked his whole life would belong to someone else. She folded the letter slowly and pressed it into the pocket of her apron. Behind her, the sound of small boots crossed the wooden floor. Her son Tommy appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes, too young to understand what that envelope meant, but old enough to feel the weight of it in the way she stood. She turned and gave him the best smile she could manage. "Go on and wash up," she said quietly. "I'll have breakfast ready." But even as she said it, she already knew. There was barely enough left in the kitchen for one meal. And after that, she did not know what came next. Clara had not always been alone on that land. 3 years ago, it had been full of life. Her husband, James, had built the ranch up from nothing, 1 fence post, 1 cattle pen, 1 hard season at a time. He had been the kind of man who worked until his hands bled and still came to supper with a story that made Tommy laugh. When he died a fall from his horse during the worst storm that county had seen in 20 years, he did not leave her helpless. He left her the land, a small herd, and a debt at the county bank that he had always believed they could manage. He had been right until the droughts came. 2 back-to-back summers with barely enough rain to keep the wells from drying. The cattle thinned. The money thinned. And then, like something out of a dark story, a man named Dalton arrived at her door. Raymond Dalton was not a man who raised his voice. He did not need to. He wore clean suits and carried papers wherever he went, and he had a way of speaking that made difficult things sound perfectly reasonable. He had bought up several land debts in the county and made it his business to collect on them legally, quietly, and without exception. Clara had signed what she had to sign. She had borrowed against the land twice to survive those 2 summers. And now the note had come due. All of it, at once. A number she could not reach no matter how hard she worked or how little she ate. She had written to her brother in the East. No reply. She had spoken to the town sheriff, an older man named Whitfield, who shook his head and said he was sorry, but there was nothing the law could do if the papers were in order. She had prayed, quietly, in the dark, when Tommy was asleep and could not hear. And now it was 30 days. It was on the 4th day after that letter arrived that she first noticed the stranger. He was not the sort of man who called attention to himself. He arrived in town on foot, leading a tired horse by the reins, and stopped at the general store for supplies. He wore a plain coat, worn at the elbows, and a hat that had seen more weather than most. Nobody knew his name at first. He paid for his things, said very little, and found a spot at the edge of the livery to camp for the night. What people did notice was how he worked. Within 2 days of arriving, he had fixed the broken water trough outside the blacksmith shop without being asked. He had helped old Mrs. Henley carry her goods from the supply cart to her door when no one else stopped to offer. Small things, quiet things. The kind that people noticed without knowing exactly why. Clara did not pay much attention at first. She had enough to worry about. She spent her mornings trying to save what was left of the herd and her afternoons writing letters and running numbers that never added up. It was Tommy who mentioned the stranger first. "Mama," he said one evening, "there's a man fixing our fence." She stepped outside and shielded her eyes against the setting sun. Sure enough, there was a figure at the far edge of her property, quietly resetting the posts that had come loose over the winter. She walked out to him, her steps deliberate and her expression firm. "I didn't ask for help," she said when she reached him. He straightened, brushing dirt from his hands. He was older than she expected up close, with lines around his eyes that came from years of working in the sun, and a steadiness in the way he looked at her that was hard to read. "No, ma'am," he said simply. "You didn't. Then why are you here?" He glanced at the fence, then back at her. "Because it needed doing." She stood there a moment, not sure whether to be grateful or suspicious. In her experience, men who did things without being asked usually wanted something in return. I can't pay you, she said flatly. I know. Then what is it you're after? He picked up his tools and looked out across her land for a long moment before answering. Nothing from you, he said. I'm just passing through. He paused. Eli, he added, as if she had asked for his name. That's what folks call me. She studied him one more moment, then turned and walked back toward the house without another word. But she did not stop him from working. Over the next several days, Eli kept at it. He repaired the fence along the east field, redug a section of the irrigation ditch that had silted over, and quietly tended to 2 calves that had been struggling. He never asked for permission. He never asked for thanks. He slept in the barn without complaint and accepted a plate of food each evening as if it were far more than he expected. Tommy had taken to following him around within the first day. The boy asked questions the way children do, constant, curious, without any sense of boundaries. Eli answered them all patiently. Where had he come from? Many places. Had he ever been in a fight? Once or twice. Did he know how to rope? He said he could manage. Clara watched this from a careful distance, unsure how to feel. She was grateful for the help, she could not pretend otherwise. The work Eli was doing would have taken her weeks alone. But she could not shake the feeling that there was something he was not saying. Something about the way he sometimes stopped and looked out at the tree line. Something about the worn piece of paper he carried in his inside coat pocket, one she had noticed him glance at and then quickly put away. One evening she brought 2 cups of coffee to the porch and sat beside him as the sun went down. Tommy was already asleep. The land was quiet. Where were you before this? She asked. He looked at the horizon for a long time. Tracking something, he said. Tracking what? A pause. A pattern. A way a certain kind of man does business across too many counties for it to be coincidence. Clara set her cup down. What kind of business? He turned to look at her then, and what she saw in his face was not danger. It was something heavier. Like a man who had seen an injustice repeat itself one too many times and had finally decided to stop watching. The kind that looks legal on paper, he said, until you look at all the papers together. The silence that followed was not comfortable. But it was the kind that held something true in it. You know about Dalton, she said. It was not a question. He did not deny it. I know about several like him. She looked out at the fields, her fields, and felt the weight of the last 3 years press down on her all at once. And what can you do about it? She asked, her voice quieter now, not from weakness but from exhaustion she had been carrying too long. I don't know yet, he said honestly. But I'm not leaving until I do. On the 18th day, Raymond Dalton arrived. He came with 2 men behind him, riding slowly up the dirt road to her property as if he owned it already. His suit was dark and pressed, and he carried a leather satchel under one arm with the calm of a man who had done this many times before. He stopped at the gate and looked over the land with an expression that said he was already calculating what it was worth. Clara stepped off the porch and met him at the fence. She kept her hands at her sides and her chin level, refusing to let him see how hard her heart was pounding. Mrs. Clara, he said, tipping his hat just enough to be considered polite. I trust you received my letter. I did. Then you understand the situation. He opened his satchel and produced a stack of papers, clean and official looking. The note is due in 12 days. I've come to give you the opportunity to discuss your options before that date arrives. My only option is to keep my land, she said. He gave a small smile, the kind that had nothing warm in it. That's an admirable position. But the figures don't support it. He glanced at the papers. You've defaulted on the extended terms. That means the full balance is due. Not in installments. All of it. And we both know. She's not alone. The voice came from behind Clara. Eli stepped forward from the side of the barn, moving slowly, unhurried. He stopped beside her with the same quiet firmness he carried everywhere. Dalton's eyes moved to him with a flicker of something that was not quite surprise. More like recognition. "Mr. Eli," he said, and the fact that he knew the name told Clara something important. "Dalton," Eli replied. No title. No politeness. Just a name returned like a stone dropped on hard ground. The two riders behind Dalton shifted slightly. One of them had a hand resting too close to his hip for it to be casual. "You're a long way from where I last heard your name," Dalton said. "Not as far as you hoped," Eli replied. Dalton's expression did not change, but something behind his eyes did. "This is a legal matter," he said, addressing Clara again. "The documents are in order. The debt is valid. If payment isn't made by the due date, the deed transfers. That's the law." "Whose law?" Clara said, her voice sharper now. "Recorded law," he said. "I have every paper signed and witnessed." Tommy appeared in the doorway behind them. Clara glanced back and gave the boy a look that told him to stay where he was. He obeyed, but his eyes stayed fixed on the men at the gate. "Every paper," Dalton repeated, tapping his satchel. "All legal. All binding. Except one," Eli said. He reached into his coat and drew out that same piece of paper Clara had noticed him carry. He unfolded it carefully, the way a man handles something that has taken a long time to find, and held it out. Dalton did not take it at first. He looked at it the way a man looks at something he hoped would never surface. "You want to tell her what this says," Eli said, "or should I?" A pause that stretched too long. Then, "Where did you get that?" "From the man you bought the Henley note from," Eli said. "Old Mr. Henley. He signed over his loan rights to you 2 years ago under duress, he told me so himself before he passed. And tucked in with his personal documents was a copy of the original land registry for this entire southern parcel." He turned toward Clara. "Your husband's grandfather registered this land in 1871 under a homestead grant," he said. "That grant included a covenant, a clause that protects family-held land from seizure due to secondary debt for a period of 30 years. That period doesn't expire until 1923. Clara stared at him. The air in the yard felt very still. "That covenant was never disclosed when Dalton purchased the notes," Eli continued, looking back at the man at the gate. "Which means he's been collecting on loans he knew he had no legal right to enforce. Not here. Not on this land." One of the riders shifted. Dalton's jaw tightened. "That document hasn't been verified," he said, but the edge in his voice had softened, just barely. "No," Eli agreed. "Not yet. But I've already sent copies to the county land office and to a lawyer in the capital who takes a particular interest in homestead fraud." He let that sit. "How many families in this county have you done this to, Dalton?" "Because I've been counting. And the number is enough to matter." The silence that followed was different from any silence that had come before in that yard. It was the kind that fell when something shifts and everyone present knows it, even if they cannot yet name exactly what changed. Dalton looked at the paper one more time. Then he looked at Clara, not with authority now, but with the eyes of a man recalculating. He closed his satchel. He straightened his coat. And he said, very quietly, "We'll be in touch." He turned his horse and rode out. His 2 men followed without a word. No one moved for a moment. Then Clara let out a breath she felt like she had been holding for 3 years. Tommy came running from the doorway and grabbed her hand, looking up at her with wide eyes. "Is he gone?" he asked. "For now," she said, and pulled him close. She looked up at Eli. He was folding the paper back into his pocket, as if the whole thing had been no more than a difficult errand finally finished. She did not know what to say. She had faced hard things before, but she had always faced them alone. She had almost forgotten what it felt like to have someone standing beside her. "How long have you been carrying that paper?" she asked. "Since February," he said. "I've been following Dalton's trail since autumn. This county was the last one. You came here for him." "Yes." He paused. "But I didn't know about you until I arrived." She looked out at the land. The fields she had almost lost. The ranch James had built. The life she had been fighting to hold together with both hands for 2 years. What happens next? She asked. The lawyer will file the covenant claim within the week, he said. Dalton will have to return any title he took under these conditions. There may be other families in the county who get their land back too. He said this quietly, without pride. Like it was simply what needed to happen. And you? She asked. Where do you go after this? He looked at the barn. At the fence line he had repaired. At Tommy, who was now leaning against Clara's side watching him with those wide, trusting eyes. I've been moving from place to place a long time, he said finally. Longer than I should have. He met her eyes. This land needs work. You know that. The south field won't make it through another season without attention, and the cattle herd needs time to recover. She did not speak, waiting. I'm not asking for anything, he said carefully. Only the chance to stay and help finish what's already started. No promises. Just work, and time, and see what the land tells us. It was not a grand speech. It was not poetry. It was the kind of offer that came from a man who had learned to say exactly what he meant and nothing more. Clara looked at her son. Then at the fields. Then at the man standing in her yard who had carried a piece of paper for months on the chance that it might save someone he had not yet met. There's a spare room beside the barn, she said. It's not much. It's enough, he said. Tommy let go of her hand and took a few careful steps toward Eli. Can you teach me to rope? He asked, as if they had all the time in the world. Eli looked at the boy. And for the first time since she had met him, he smiled. A real one, that reached all the way to his eyes. Start tomorrow, he said. Clara turned back toward the house. The sun had broken through the clouds, spreading slow and warm across the southern field, touching the fence posts and the dry grass and the patches of ground that had been, until very recently, almost lost. Something had settled in her chest that had not been there for years. Not joy, exactly. Not yet. But something close to it. Something that felt like a beginning. Sometimes the thing you needed most did not arrive the way you expected. It did not announce itself. It came quietly, fixed your fence without asking, and waited until you were ready to believe that not everything in this world was set against you. And sometimes, that was enough to change everything. Thank you for watching this story. If it moved you, if it stayed with you even a little, that's exactly what we set out to do here at Dark Truth Files. Every story we tell is about people holding on when everything says let go. If you want more stories like this, of courage, of hidden truths, and of moments that change everything, subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell so you never miss one. And drop a comment below. Tell us, what did Eli's moment mean to you? Was it the paper he carried, or the way he showed up without being asked? We read every one. We'll see you in the next story.